I squealed out loud when I came across your vivid grammar section
I
because
know.
I was like,
I know.
this is such great work. I was like, why didn't I think of it?
Yes.
So I was blown away by it. So I want to give an overview of what the vivid grammar is and how it's used.
Okay. So the thought, Nancy, is this. We know that we need to shift from being as verbal as we are to being a little bit more visual. And over the years, there's been a lot of people who've this is not a new idea. We need to be more visual.
Yeah.
And what we've tried to do many, many times, many different people have tried to come up with something that we'd call visual grammar. Is there a universal language of pictures? And we can go back 5,000 years to the hieroglyphics and look for the basis. Is there an underlying grammar of vision? There's kind of not, at least not in a way that we're going to be able to nail down. And we keep trying and it doesn't stick. So I thought of this. I thought, well, look, we've already got the basics of verbal grammar, and let's just take the English language.
Yeah.
I mean, it's evolved for thousands and thousands of years, and we know the rules. So you and I can stand here and have this conversation, and you know what I'm talking about, and I can understand you.
Yeah.
So I thought, rather than inventing something new, what would happen if we went back to the underpinnings of what verbal grammar is all about, and we made a visual description of the same thing? And so that, to me, becomes this tool, which is really the heart of blah, 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 that I call vivid grammar, because this is the cheat sheet that's going to take us from saying, I know how to describe an idea with words, but I don't know how to draw it, which I'm guessing is probably what you hear from business people a lot. Like Nancy,
They can say it, but they can't see it.
well, you're telling me to make a chart or draw a picture in lieu of all these words, but Nancy, I don't know how to draw. What would I say? Forget all of that. Here's what we're going to do. Take what you already know, and let's add a visual spin to it. So here's the way it works. Vivid grammar graph. I call this the vivid grammar graph. It breaks down every kind of picture we could draw and every kind of idea we can express verbally and locks them together. So the thought is, if we want to talk about who's and what's, the most simple parts of our idea, like I want to talk about you, or I want to talk about my book, I would just draw a little portrait. I could say, okay, Nancy, here's you.
There I am.
There you are. So I could just draw a little picture of you. Okay, but now let's say I want to talk about, well, how much? The thing that finance people love to talk about. Do I have enough money? What picture would I draw to show how much? Well, then I draw a little chart, and then I have where. I want to talk about where things are. I'm not interested so much in you per se. I'm interested in where are you in relation to me. So then I draw a little map. This is you, Nancy, and this is me over here. And then let's say later I'm interested in, we're working together, and when do things need to happen? Well, then I would draw a little timeline, a little process diagram, exactly. And then let's say you and I are working together, and it's a complicated project, and we need to figure out how are we going to get this done and this done. Then we draw a little flow chart that summarizes the how. And then when we put them all together, we end up with the why, where we're going to draw kind of a plot. Now, this is just pictures.
I love this, yeah.
But imagine this. This is actually derived from the structure of language. These are the nouns.
This is the part I just went
This is-
ape over. I
This
couldn't
is-
believe it.
This is where I went
Yeah.
ape too, because it was like this discovery. It's all there in front of
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
and when we draw it out, we can see it. These are the nouns. These are the adjectives. How many? How much? What color? This is what we can show with our charts. And these are the prepositions.
The where.
The where. Well, before, after, on top of, below, beside, within. And when is the tense. So it happened yesterday. It will happen
In the
tomorrow.
future.
How are verbs.
I love that.
How's that going to work? Well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to shift it to that, and then I'm going to twist it over here. I'm going to string my verbs together. And then what is this? This is actually the entire sentence. This is really a complex sentence. When I put it all together and I say, I've boiled everything down, and I've got my X's and my Y's, and I'm looking at my Z's and my A's and my B's, I've got a whole story to tell. The reason why I think this is cool is because what it tells us is, if I can write a sentence that begins to describe my idea, I now have built in a way to draw it.
To write a
Woo!
visual sentence.
Exactly.
Remember there was a lot of conversations around that we were calling it verbal language a while ago, kind of
Yeah.
building off of Bob Horn's work and all of
There you
that
go.
stuff. And I
Yep.
think people started to like pick on it because, well, what about syntax? What about, and it was just like, wow, You've got the fundamental building blocks here in the grammar,
I
and
think.
all you got to do is assemble it, and it kind of simplified it, I think, by calling it grammar instead of language, right?
I
'Cause
think so.
language has so many other nuances to it. So I cried a little. I was so happy for you.
Well, you know, it's funny because if you think about it, just knowing grammar doesn't mean that you and I can say something intelligent. I mean, grammar, you know, seriously,
true.
grammar are just the rules, the building blocks upon which we build
Yeah.
our sentences or our poetry or our
That's true.
five-paragraph
You could
essay.
be knowing what it is. You could still be a little bit illiterate visually.
Yeah.
Or,
Well, what it does is it says, okay, because we all consider ourselves visually illiterate. I mean, how many have you ever walked into one of your business conferences where there's all the scary business people sitting there and you're there to teach them how to make better visuals and better storytelling? And you ask them, okay, how many of you can draw?
yeah.
I mean, how many people jump up out of the chair and say, ooh, I do? None of
Yeah,
them.
none of them.
You know, and maybe a third say, yeah, I was a great drawer when I was back in school, but I've
Yeah.
never done. It's been beaten out of us. What the idea behind Vivid Grammar is, here are the basic building blocks. If you can write a sentence about your idea, if you can create a PowerPoint page, you know, if you can do this, you know, here's your headline and here are your 4 or 5 bullet points. If you can do that, this is the little sort of magic shaker
Yeah.
that allows you to input the same information and output your pictures. I think it's cool.
Yeah. So much of what we communicate in business today is invisible. We talk about HR structures, or even software technically is invisible. And so having a tool where you could actually describe, you know, what you do by combining shapes and
There you
showing
go.
their relationships, it just is, it's amazing. I was so pleased.
Well,
So
I'm glad
pleased
you
that
liked
did
it.
this.
I've been using this now to try to explain. I like you, I work with a lot of people here in the Valley. You know, people who've got a complex idea for a piece of software.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, if I may just go on for one more minute, you know, how do we use this? This is a nice abstract tool. So how would we actually make it work? I've been thinking about this one a lot lately. Imagine if I was creating a piece of software that somehow took advantage of my mobile device's GPS locator. And I went off and I want to get venture capital because I've got this idea of how I'm going to create a socially networked GPS location software that leverages, you know, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Pretty soon people are going to be like, what? Imagine if I said this. Okay, look, here's the way it works. I've got a person. I've started with a noun. My person is unhappy because my person is lost. They don't know where they are. But let's say my person has a mobile device, and my mobile device is GPS enabled. So now the person can look at the mobile device, look at their GPS, and suddenly know where they are. Now, there's a very, very simple little description, and it took some words to get through it. But the beauty of it is, this to me is a perfect example of what you can do with vivid thinking, vivid grammar. I could be sitting across the table from you trying to give you my sales pitch on why you should give me money to invest in my Foursquare application.
Yeah.
Imagine what would happen if I did exactly that. You follow along, you see it, and because the drawing's still in front of us, we can refer back to it. Nothing's lost, as it would have been if I was just talking. That's how you use this.
I love this example specifically because I think so many times people get into the features and the benefits and they forget that the reason they're inventing this stuff is to make humankind better. So I would love
right.
it if people, when they think of the nouns, if they do come up with an inanimate object, that they always include the who and not always just the what, because
Yes.
a lot of times, like even routers, you know, yeah, routers shuffle information all over the place, but how do they help humankind, right?
Here's our router. Wee! You know, like, okay.
Right.
So, yeah, let's
Where's
buy
your
a whole
verb
bunch
here?
more of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
So, well,
you gotta
because
have humans, and then the humans have to have a verb that they do with that router that's compelling, right?
something goes through there that,
Yeah.
you know, does something. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then this thing can become kind of sexy, you know?
Right.
So,
Because it changes lives, and we forget about that. So
there you go.
love this, love the model. So
Perfect.
I was really pleased when I saw it. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share it. I like it too.